Hello everyone, this is the Bulgarian Stock Exchange earnings call for the first half of 2019. We're now doing a replay of Monday's event since some of our viewers told us that they experienced some technical difficulties. My name is Ivo Stankov and I shall briefly present to you a short market overview and the report of the exchange for the first half of 2019. Once you're familiar with our financial standing, Ivan Takev, CEO of Bulgarian Stock Exchange, shall present to you the progress of our ongoing projects and our plans for the future. I want to remind you that there is a number on each slide. Feel free to ask questions. Since you're going to watch this recording on YouTube, you couldn't ask the questions live, but feel free to contact us through email, by phone, or in any other way which is suitable for you. We will answer the questions as soon as possible. Moving on to the presentation. The first half of 2019 was less active regarding trading than the previous periods. Market capitalization increased by 3.1% during the period and by 16.27% compared to the first half of 2018, as the values of all indices calculated by BSE grew. Equity turnover decreased by nearly 45% compared to both the first and the second half of 2018. The equity trade formed nearly 83% of the total turnover in the first year half, while trade in most groups of financial instruments decreased. As usual, financial and insurance activities occupied the top of the industry's turnover ranking in the first half, almost matching the cumulative turnover of all other branches and forming 49% of the turnover. This makes the turnover and capitalization of Bulgarian Stock Exchange particularly sensitive to shocks and bad news related to the banking and insurance sectors. The number of listed issues remained the same in the beginning and at the end of the period. We are now moving on to the financial standings of BSE Sofia for the first year half. With regard to sales revenue of the exchange, there was a decrease by 10.7% where compared to the first year half of 2018, mainly due to a drop in trading fees by 37%, and online trading fees by 60%. However, it is notable that online trading fees decreased so notably because since we adopted and implemented the new trading platform T7 in June, the Copos online trading system was discontinued. Information services fees grew by 6%, while issue parameters change fees grew fivefold, but in absolute terms both were negligible compared to the 136,000 BGN drop in trading fees. Finance revenue soared from 622,000 BGN in the respective 2018 period to 751,000 BGN because of the revenue from the IBEX subsidiary dividend distribution. The other revenue from operations item reflects an amount of 30,000 less, which was paid to the exchange by the corporate commercial bank liquidators on a receivable we had from the bank. The other revenue items changed insignificantly. The comparison between the structure of revenue in the first half of 2018 and first half of 2019 shows the share of each revenue item. Although at first things seem quite different, we have prepared another chart without the finance revenue to illustrate the fact that the share of each item remains relatively stable over time, keeping in mind what we just said on the previous slide. And here is the comparison between the structure of revenue in the two periods with the finance revenue excluded. You can see that most of the items have comparatively same size. Moving on to cost. The operating expenses decreased by 0.43% where compared to the 30th of June in 2018. Hired services expenses increased by 36,000 levs, or 8.43%, while personnel costs dropped by 2.77%, or 17,000 levs. The other operating cost item decreased by 19,000 levs, or 31.67%. The change in the other cost items is insignificant. Including finance cost, the total change in expenses is 0.09%. The comparison between the cost in the first half of 2018 and 2019 shows a stable structure of cost. Regarding revenue, cost, and financial result of the exchange, at the end of June 2019, the net financial result achieved by BSE is positive to the amount of 1,505,000 BGN, which is mainly due to increasing finance revenue, dropping operating cost, and operating revenue. As at 30th of June 2018, the operating loss of BSE was 192,000 less, and in the current period, the operating loss was 234,000 less. The operating loss is mainly due to the low operating revenue, namely lower trading fees and information services fees. The total comprehensive income for the period changed from 397,000 BGN in June 2018 to 1,504,000 BGN at the end of the reported period. We shall now move to assets and liabilities. The total assets of the Bulgarian Stock Exchange at the end of the first year half of 2019 were 1,268,000 less, or 11% higher than the value at the end of 2018. The main change is due to an increase in other receivables and prepaid expenses item in the current assets, where a receivable from the independent Bulgarian Energy Exchange subsidiary on the dividend distribute is accounted. The values of the other asset positions changed insignificantly, as at the end of June 2018, also at the end of the current period, the company had no term deposits with banks. Regarding liabilities, the value of retained profits at the end of 2018 was 379,000 less, while its value at the end of the current period amounted to 1,469,000 less. The profit accumulated at the end of the first year half of 2019 is due to operating activities from the current period. It reflects also the dividend revenue from the IBEX subsidiary. Reserve also grew according to the decision adopted by the annual general meeting of shareholders held on the 18th of June 2019 to allocate half of the 2018 profits to reserve. Current liabilities decreased by 2%, while non-current liabilities remained the same. This is the shareholder structure of the Bulgarian Stock Exchange, showing also the share of foreign shareholders. You can see that there are no major changes in the shareholder structure of BSE during the period, and in comparison to the previous quarters, it also remains quite stable. The trade in Bulgarian Stock Exchange own shares, our exchange ticker is BSO, was quite active in the first half of 2019. The average price for the year half was 5.204 BGN per share. The price at the end of the year half decreased by 0.182 less per share, or 3.37%. It changed from 540 closing price on the 31st of December 2018 to 5.218 per share on the 30th of June 2019. The minimum price per share was 450 and the maximum price per share was 590. A total of 168,124 shares were transferred in 675 trades. The total turnover was 888,807 less, which in comparison to the 388,191 shares transferred in 386 trades and the total turnover of 2,207,819 less during the second half of 2018, marked a volume decrease by 57%, a decrease in the turnover by 60%, and an increase in the number of trades by 75%. Shares were traded in 85 out of 120 sessions during the reported period. And here is a quick summary of the data regarding trading BSE own shares during the first year half of 2019, which I just quoted. I shall now let Ivan Takev, CEO of the exchange, present to you the progress of our ongoing projects and our plans for the future. Ivan?
Thank you, Ivo. Hello, everyone. Within the next 10 to 15 minutes, I will try to brief you on our activities in the last quarter and provide you with, of course, with an overview of what we will be up to in the third quarter of 2019. Starting with BSE International Market, as we previously announced, at the previous earnings call, the BSE board took a formal decision to look for alternative counterparties to make this process happening due to the slow progress and unclear timeline with the current counterparties. However, due to the recently reactivated dialogue with the settlement agents, that decision has not been officially enforced by the board. We passed connection tests in the second half of July with the settlement agent. They mostly relate to settlement and exchange of information. However, we still haven't been informed about the results of those tests. The settlement agent actually mentioned that there were certain issues that were identified on their side, but they are still not resolved, obviously. As a result of that, the project timeline still remains unclear. However, as I said previously, BSE is still working on that project, and it's not cancelled. It won't be cancelled, actually, but we would rather look for an alternative. Moving on to SE Link, not really much happening here in the last quarter. The trading activity is quite low. We actually marked a decrease in the number of the participating brokers as a result of the introduced broker inactivity fee. That fee was introduced by SE Link because there were many brokers that didn't connect to other counterparties from the corresponding countries. They were part of the platform, and as a result of that, SE Link incurs certain fees. We didn't want to tolerate that for a third consecutive year. That's why we introduced a monthly broker inactivity fee amounting to €100. As a result of that, some of the brokers decided to leave the project. At the moment, we have two Bulgarian investment firms that connect over FIX, which was ultimately our desire when we started the project. We wanted automated connection between all the members of SE Link, and for two Bulgarian firms, that's a fact. Not much has happened with regards to the settlement solution proposed by Raiffeisen Bank due to low activity of the depositories. What we expect here in the future is that the brokers will connect themselves between themselves rather than a centralized solution that will intermediate settlement between the various brokers. In the meantime, as we announced at the previous earnings call, EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, launched a supplementary project which ultimately aims at providing sell-side research of listed companies for 2 consecutive years. According to the terms of reference of that project, the consultant that will be selected by EBRD will have to cover 8 listed companies from 6 countries. These 6 countries are Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, Croatia, Macedonia, and Slovenia for 2 years. EBRD started the selection process, but the consultant hasn't been announced yet. We expect that will happen in the following weeks. In the meantime, EBRD selected SE Link Skopje, the company that owns the SE Link infrastructure, to act as a dissemination hub. That hub will provide access to all of the sell-side research that will be produced by the consultant over the course of the next 2 years. Once the consultant is announced by EBRD, it will disclose more about its readiness to provide that research and the timeline for that. And a few words on our focus areas. In terms of trading technology, on 24th of June, BSE successfully migrated to the next generation trading platform, Xetra T7, which replaced the legacy Xetra Classic. We simultaneously implemented a brand new surveillance platform. It's called Skill Surveillance, and it's provided by the Swedish software vendor Skilla. That platform will be used for market surveillance purposes by both BSE and the Financial Supervision Commission. As a result of the implementation of Xetra T7, we mark an increase in the number of trading tools provided by brokers and back office platforms that are based on T7 messaging protocols. These are namely FIX and ETI, the Enhanced Trading Interface, which is a proprietary protocol of Deutsche Börse and Xetra T7. With regards to the SME growth market, what should be noted here is that we will continue with our efforts to promote the SME growth market as much as we can. We actually conducted a third event together with the SME Promotion Agency. This one was held in Burgas in the second half of June. We presented the SME growth market and the voucher scheme run by the SME Promotion Agency before the local business in Burgas. I would say that this was the most successful event of all of that we have held so far. More than 35 companies, representatives of more than 35 companies attended that event and expressed significant interest in the Bulgarian Stock Exchange run markets. We will continue after the end of the summer season with the promotion of the SME growth market in various other regions of Bulgaria. And finally, the benchmarks regulation. Under that European regulation, all entities that calculate indices which underlie financial instruments are required to apply for authorization. That authorization is either licensing or registration before December 30th, 2019. Bulgarian Stock Exchange is a regulated entity, and as such, it will have to apply for registration. We currently calculate two benchmarks. These are SOFIX and BGTR 30. They underlie other financial instruments that are listed on the Bulgarian Stock Exchange. The process requires that certain procedures and policies should be developed, approved by the BSE board, and approved, of course, by the Financial Supervision Commission. There is no deadline for such approval. The deadline is for filing the documents with the FSC. We plan to do that in Q3 2019 or Q4 at the latest, if there are certain delays that we at the moment don't expect, but these may happen. As a result of that, BSE will become compliant with the benchmarks regulation, so it will continue to provide markets in instruments that are based on benchmarks and other indices. Basically, that was from my side in terms of all the activities that we plan for the next quarter. As Ivo stated in the beginning, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. This is not a live recording, so we will have no option to ask them via the webinar platform, but please feel free to connect with us over the email or over the phone. Thank you very much for your attention. Please stay tuned for our next earnings call in 3 months.